Welcome to the enterprise-wide Wellbeing Workshop on navigating team dynamics. The vision of the employee wellbeing team is to create the culture and environment where our employees feel supported in all aspects of their work and life, allowing our people to do their best work. And in order to best support you, we have a variety of resources available at the Wellbeing Central intranet site. And you can find Wellbeing Central by going to the Mayo Clinic homepage, selecting Health and Wellbeing, and then Wellbeing Central. There you'll find resources to support you, such as our Wellbeing Network newsletter, Wellbeing Index, along with opportunities to join our Wellbeing and Resiliency coaching groups or other virtual workshops like this one. In addition, we have peer-to-peer support through our help program or fostering well-being within our work units through our champion program, recognition resources, or even the supervisor toolkit. In addition, it's so important to an employee well-being team that we offer you resources that foster the Mayo Clinic values, especially fostering compassion, healing, and teamwork during this challenging time. And so I'm so grateful to have our presenters here today, Brooke Werneberg and Heather Preston, our senior advisors with the Mayo Clinic Experience Training, Education, and Coaching Department, here to speak on navigating team dynamics. This workshop is recorded if you would like to share it with your colleagues. So welcome, Brooke and Heather.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bridget. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Hopefully everyone's able to see that okay. Maybe Bridget just give me an okay or a yes in the chat. I think Heather's given a thumbs up. We're good. Well, on behalf of Mayo Clinic Experience Training, Education, and Coaching, which is a mouthful, we just call ourselves X-Tech for short. We just wish to say thank you to each of you for the role that you play here at Mayo Clinic, whether you're in a leadership role or a support staff role or colleague-to-colleague role, seeing patients or working behind the scenes. I've never been so proud to work at Mayo Clinic, and I know, Heather, you've worked here many years as well, and I'm sure are feeling the same thing. So thank you so much for the great work that you do every day. So navigating team dynamics, this is a fun topic. I think that Heather and I have been learning more about ourselves and really trying to implement some of these skills in the work that we do, and we're happy to share them with you today. We're going to talk about several key communication strategies as we explore the different dimensions of working with teams, right? Teamwork is what brings us together. It helps us to meet those Mayo Clinic values that Bridget discussed of innovation and creating new solutions and brainstorming and solving problems together. It's also where we find our sense of culture and support for one another. So how do we help with our communication skills to make those spaces the best that they can be? So we're going to talk about those key approaches today. You can learn about these to apply both in a virtual space like we're doing now, so things like Zoom meetings, or in-person spaces, so things like around the table and one-on-one conversations, as well as small group. Now, some of you might be in a formal leadership role, which is great. These are skills you can use, but I also invite those of us that maybe lead projects or lead team-based work and maybe don't have supervisory roles to still use these approaches. So we'll talk facilitation strategies for team dynamics, and we'll also just talk about case scenarios today and how we can apply those. So here is our first polling opportunity. I'll describe how we're going to respond today, but we'd like to invite you to think about which of these would you classify as maybe your biggest challenge in working with different dynamics. Is it number one, the cricket crowd? So where we have maybe quieter folks, where we're trying to elevate them. The dominator, which is one that maybe overtakes or populates their response early and quickly to the point where others maybe get pushed into the shadows. Is it herding cats, where everyone's excited potentially and there's a lot of different ideas and we're trying to rein all of those in and stay back on topic? Or is it me versus we? So perhaps we leave a situation, and as I'm reflecting, I'm thinking, why is it I'm over here and the rest of my team or other group members are way over here? What is it? What's in that gap? So go ahead and place your votes here. Biggest challenge for us: cricket crowd, dominators, herding cats, or me versus we today. give some folks a moment to respond. I know, Heather, this is helpful for us as we look at spending time on these topics here today.
Yeah, for sure. And we're seeing a good mix, recognizing that none of these are probably easy and difficult situations to be in. And most of you are probably having a difficult time picking one of them to choose.
Absolutely. I see Angie's comment here, all of the above. We
Yeah,
should have created a fifth option. Absolutely. All right. So seeing the cricket crowd as a predominant topic here, followed by those others close right behind, Dominators, Herding Cats, and Groupthink. So we will be spending quite a bit of time on each of those. And feel free as we're going along, if there's something that we want to dive more into in a specific situation, like Michelle, I'm seeing here, the biggest problem is that negative person complaining harshly within the team meeting and group. Populate some of those within the Q&A. We don't want to lose sight of those today if we have a specific question or scenario, because hopefully at the end we'll have a few moments to dive into those. So populate those in the Q&A so we can come back to those here at the end today. So here's the results. I think everyone can see that okay from our first poll. All right. Here we go then. Let's talk a little bit about the first cricket crowd, Heather.
All right, so this one came to the top of the list in the poll, and I'm guessing all of you are thinking about a time where you've maybe prepared for a meeting. You were hoping for some really good dialogue. You were hoping to seek some input from the team to help kind of make some decisions. You create that space by asking, or eliciting their perspective, and you get nothing. So I'd like to just hear from you. What does that feel like as a leader? What are some of the things that are going through your mind as a leader? So in your chat function, just type away the things that you might be thinking or feeling in that moment where you feel like, gosh, as a leader, I've created this space and I'm getting nothing. I'm getting that cricket crowd.
So thinking about our reaction, right, Heather?
What's our reaction to it?
What am I sensing?
Yeah. What are you thinking and feeling?
I love that. Is anyone else there? Right. That's what we're kind of having that self-thought.
Yeah. It's frustrating. Like it gets old after time that you feel like you're having to pull teeth in every conversation to get people to participate. So certainly can bring up some emotions for you as a leader, specifically around frustration. You question if they agree, or why is there some cricket crowd happening here? Why is there quiet? And so you start to question: is it me? Am I asking the right question, the wrong question? Am I crazy, Victoria? Right? Like, doesn't anybody agree with me on this topic? So lots of emotions can surface for us in those moments as leaders. And I want you to step back and take us out of the picture for a moment and think about what might the people on the receiving end be thinking. What's creating that quiet or that silence that you're receiving from your team? So again, back in your chat function, what might be happening on the other end, creating that silence? Yeah, if it's in a virtual environment, people might be multitasking, so they may not have heard the question at hand. That's certainly something that can be happening.
Yeah, I'm seeing things like fear, right? They might be scared to
Yeah,
give a response or feel, is it my role to share?
right. Lacking self-confidence. So I maybe have something I want to say, but I'm not really confident. I'm worried about what people might say or how they might respond to my contribution. Worried that it's not a safe environment to share. So they may have things that they want to contribute or feedback they want to share, but they're worried how it might be received. And that safe space can be very difficult for people to step up.
And really good responses here.
Yeah, really good. They've been shut down in the past. So that previous experience certainly can play into how they proceed in the future. Worried that others won't have their same viewpoint, right? They don't want to be that opposing perspective that's coming. Yeah, sometimes, Christy, silence is just easier, isn't it? And so it takes us off of the kind of platform of sharing. And so sometimes just stepping back can be much easier. And so people choose to do that. So let's talk about what gets in the way, right, of people not contributing. And the first, or the key, I guess I would say, is creating that safe environment. So really allowing that space for people to contribute, asking those open questions, validating what it is that you're hearing, and really, again, allowing space for people to ask questions. So validating that this is a challenging conversation that we're going to be having. And I appreciate the courage that it might take to share a perspective today. Sometimes we have to be really clear about what our intent is in that moment. So saying things like, I'm looking for your input. I'm hoping to get some feedback on this topic today. Or maybe it's just that today I want to share some information with you. So being very clear about that and what our intent is for that conversation. I think being honest and open with the team is really important as well. Sometimes we have to be able to share honestly what we know and what we don't know. And so we know staff love to kind of be in the know of that communication. And I think sometimes it's hard for us as leaders to be transparent and honest about things because maybe we don't even know ourselves. But anytime that we can just be transparent about what we know and don't know, I think can be very valuable. You know, Brooke, sometimes staff need a little bit of encouragement, maybe even some motivation to feel like they can bring their perspective to the table. So I'm curious, you know, I've seen you do a lot of great work in facilitating and in team meetings. What in terms of things that we can do as leaders in this area to invite that conversation? What are some of those strategies?
Yeah, I think about, behavior change, right? We're empowering that intrinsic motivation, that internal drive. It's like lighting little sparks so that maybe a fire can be erupted, a good fire, right? For maybe brainstorming or ideas or discussion. So some things I think about are, what can I share early? Not all of us are verbal people. Some need time to think or prepare ahead of time. Some prefer typing, like what we're doing today, not just verbally speaking. So I always think about, how can I engage all types of personalities or all types of learners? So to share and invite topics ahead. So if I can plant the seed early, please come prepared to think about this question. This might be the topic on today's agenda. I'd love to hear some ideas. I also might try to allow for some unstructured time. As we start our team meetings, I know, Heather, we just take 5 minutes to connect. We rotate team topics of who's going to start the icebreaker at different team meetings, just to kind of let down our guard, settle into a space, and connect. As human beings, we have a need to connect with others. It makes us feel safe, not just seeing me for the task that I can perform. So to really feel me and know me as a person. So if we can allow for any unstructured time, if you have that ability just to connect, share a highlight, tell something funny, best thing you're looking forward to, as small as it is, it can make such a big difference just for letting our defenses down.
Yeah, it's such a balance, isn't it, Brooke? Because I think about, as a leader, you have an agenda. You maybe meet with your team once a week, sometimes even less often than that. And so how do you find that balance of allowing that time to connect with each other, to have a little bit of fun, but get through the agenda items? And certainly that can be a challenge.
And I don't know about you, Heather, but I find even in Zoom or digital spaces, we're much more likely to just dive into the topic. Yes. We don't have those nonverbal cues or sense of presence around us like we used to in a physical space. So we have to be much more intentional about saying, we're going to do this for the first couple minutes, because it just doesn't naturally happen as frequently. Yeah. So that might be something. The last thing I'll mention is sharing stories and connecting their impacts. We know that qualitative stories help prepare someone to think visually about what we're doing. You're tapping into another type of learning and thinking style. So the more we can connect what we're doing with the outcome of a story or something, it may allow people to feel more connected to the work to then more freely share. So that might be something too, just as a strategy, like, as a result of the work that we did here, here's what we've been able to see in the practice, right? And it's almost like appreciation or thanking them in a way by telling a story that connects the dots for people. So those are small little things we could maybe do to help build that intrinsic motivation. Tell me more about facilitation skills, Heather, because I know I've seen you do this as well in a lot of the team meetings.
Yeah, I think this is key as a leader. We have to be able to manage the group, and we can do that through communication and facilitation of the conversation. So I think we talked earlier about really setting expectations early on, like, what am I expecting of you? And maybe it's of the meeting itself, but maybe it's of a moment. I think about sometimes, leaders will, for example, play a video and we don't really know what our role is. And so maybe setting the stage for that, I'm going to play a video and here's what I'd like to have discussion around following the video, things like that, being very clear. So again, not just at the front end of the meeting, but throughout the meeting to set some of those expectations. I think really being able to pull in those who aren't participating. And so allowing that space. And you can see as an example here, I'd love to hear from somebody who hasn't spoken yet. If you're in person, one strategy I oftentimes use is really to turn my attention to a certain section of the room. So if, my left side is much quieter, I'll transition my body to that side and really kind of speak and engage with just a particular section of the room. And I think that can be very powerful for that. I think also silence is important. Sometimes we ask a question and it feels like an eternity for us as leaders, waiting for a response. But what's happening in that moment, Brooke, when there's silence? Why is that space or that pause so important?
I think it empowers them to know that they have an answer. I'm holding enough space and I trust that you all have something to contribute and I'm okay waiting for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's tough though. You have to kind of sit on our hands a little bit.
It is. And people need time to process. We prepare our agenda, we prepare our meetings and what we hope to get. And sometimes they don't always know that. And so people need time to process. So we encourage you to get comfortable with the silence because that certainly can be a tough thing. I also think, validating somebody's perspective when we allow the space and listen, but then affirm or validate what it is that we hear from them, that can make them feel heard and understood. And that can help to increase the participation or the perspectives that are shared, because I think that it decreases some of the fear that staff might have in that moment. So really sharing things like, again, you see on the screen, Brooke, that was a really great point. And we likely wouldn't have considered that, if you hadn't brought that forward. Another strategy is just recognizing that there might be differing opinions. And so being able to facilitate that conversation. Brooke, you shared one thing for us to consider. I'm wondering if there's any alternative views that we haven't considered up to this point. So using your communication to facilitate some of those conversations can really allow that space for people to feel comfortable and confident in bringing it forward. Brooke, anything that you would add around facilitating?
Yeah, even just what you did right there, Heather, right? Brooke, is there anything, you didn't even know you did it.
I didn't even know I did it.
Brooke, is there anything more you would add? Or is there anything more this side of the room would add? Or we haven't, heard from XYZ individuals or even roles, right? Like I'd love to hear more from nursing. What would you add to this topic? Mm-hmm. So I think calling out certain roles and inviting them to share can be helpful. The other thing I would say is sometimes people need a little bit more lift up, elevation, if you will. So Heather, you might approach me before a meeting at my one-on-one or just in side conversation and, asking me, hey, what you shared during this private meeting or private conversation could be really helpful for the group to hear. How do you feel about sharing that at our team meeting? So it's positioning them to share, particularly if it's a quieter person or someone that doesn't typically share. Sometimes I need that vote of confidence that you see this in me to be able to share it, especially for those quieter individuals.
Yeah. One other thing that I just thought of, Brooke, when you were talking was, I think in the virtual space, sometimes we tend to stay in this space where everybody's, present in a room together, but some great conversation can happen when we use some of the functionalities of Zoom, for example. We've used the chat function today. Breakout rooms can be so powerful, just to, again, give people a smaller setting to share and then ask somebody to bring it back. So if you're struggling in the larger group, think about opportunities to kind of maybe separate the group out in breakout rooms and then bring it back for a larger discussion. So that can be really powerful too.
Kind of some partner up and plan to come back to share time.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, it's much harder when we can't say turn to your neighbor, right? And talk about something. So we have to be more thoughtful in the virtual world to be able to provide that space.
Yeah. And you could do it around the table, right? Or just take 5 minutes, partner up next to you, and then plan to share what you come up with as a team. It lets them know ahead too. Great. Good discussion. Well, let's talk Dominators, Heather. So Dominators, as you and I put this work together, really talks about maybe those spirits or individuals that are very eager to share, or that feel like out of their helping spirit have some opinions or thoughts, reasons, rationale that they really, really wish to contribute. Maybe they take up a lot of airtime. Maybe it's just the time on Zoom or the space in the room. They're not always aware, right, of their presence. So thinking about that, would love to hear in your chat, what do you start to notice in your teams when someone is bringing their Dominator presence to a space, whether it's a team meeting, virtually or in person? What do you pick up on with the team? Yeah, people are shutting down, others get quiet, withdraw. Creates the cricket scenario. Exactly. Everyone just starts tuning out, right? We really only can hold that attention for so long before our brain turns the channel and shifts to something else. So you're seeing others getting frustrated. Yeah, leaving the team, body language. So you can read it. You can read the room. What do you notice in yourself? If you're the one leading, or it's your meeting or your team project, what do you notice as the leader? What's your cue that domination's just happened? What do you think? You can type that in your chat too. Yeah, you really feel a shift in the energy, right? Yeah, you feel that total change. You start noticing your tone may be changing. That's great. Sensing tension. You feel it. Yeah. Good.
Maybe questioning why is this person feeling like they need to continue to contribute? And sometimes it can be repeating. And so you wonder where are they coming from and what's their goal in sharing so much in that moment. Yeah. Trying to understand all of that.
Absolutely. And I think we can all reflect today and say, I've probably been a dominator at some point, right? It's within all of us. And what I love is thinking about perspectives. What is it that that other person might be needing right now is something I try to pause and think about. They might need validation. They might be anxious, and this is just a symptom. They might be worried. They might have a lot going on. They might not be as self-aware about this topic right now. Those are things that I think about for myself, right? And how I might project. And so we don't always know what's going on for another individual, but what we do know is that it's impacting something just by the chat here today. It's impacting others. It's impacting the way I might lead. And so it causes me to want to do something. So when I think about this, I think about some things that we can do. Heather, tell me a little bit more about like setting the tone. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really about what's important, right, in that moment. So it's important to me as your leader that everybody has an opportunity to contribute, that we all have a perspective to share, and that can lead to better results. Certainly one perspective is great, but multiple perspectives almost always tops that. And so being able to share that, really, again, allowing that space for people to share an opposing opinion. So again, setting the tone that how does everybody feel about what's been discussed up to this point? Or what, if anything, does anyone else have to add? So really, again, setting that tone is important in those meetings to create that safe space.
Yeah, it's almost like setting the expectation of how we want something to maybe go. We can't always control it, and that's okay, but we can always circle back to it later. It's like your anchor point.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good way to say it. Yeah.
I think, go ahead. You want to talk about?
No, that's okay. I was just making sure that we were seeing the chat here too. And I'm seeing some things around setting the agenda, and that can be really helpful. And so sometimes we have to use our agenda as a way to kind of move us through. And so validating what a Dominator brings to the table and express appreciation, I think, is really powerful. Sometimes we might have to think about taking that conversation offline. So if this is a pattern that we see with an individual, so Brooke tends to be the first one responding to all of the questions, that I've trying to elicit different perspectives, and we're not getting much response after Brooke shares her thoughts and ideas. I might want to pull Brooke aside and just talk with her about that. And be transparent. Brooke, I've noticed over the course of the last couple of team meetings that you have a lot of passion about the topics that we've been talking about. What am I doing there, Brooke? Why would I want to start with that? The passion that you bring.
Yeah, it's a strength, right? Potentially, or like your leadership on this topic. Yeah, so that I don't begin to be defensive right away.
Yes, very good. So again, a strategy in itself is to really affirm why it is that Brooke is doing what she's doing, but then to maybe highlight what you've noticed about the rest of the group. I've noticed that when you speak up, that people shut down, or that there isn't a lot of conversation that follows. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what I've shared with you. So I really want to invite Brooke to come into the conversation and share her perspective, because maybe she's not even aware. Right? Most of the time she's not aware. And so to give her a chance to kind of think about that. And then also talking about, so going forward, Brooke, how might we, manage that in team meetings going forward? So I think really kind of having them think through, all right, when we get back into this setting, what will I do differently, if anything?
Part of it too, Heather, I wonder, like, we could even structure meetings differently. I saw Phyllis had a great thought out there about, when we have a dedicated agenda that we're trying to move through, it allows me to have anchor points to continue to progress the conversation so that I can get on to my next topic. It allows the team to also know that there's material to move through within this conversation. I know something we've even tried is, if I'm really trying to get more perspectives across the team, and I might tee up someone ahead of the meeting to say, Heather, we're going to talk about this. It would be really appreciative if you could be my first lead off for this topic. Would you start the conversation, and then we do handoffs, right? So you would then hand it off to Tim, or you would then hand it off to someone else, and we just rotate and take turns. And so the way I can facilitate may even be just differently depending on the nature of the meeting or the nature of the discussion and what we're trying to accomplish. So the last point, I think, is just speaking up, and we can do this using our own voice, affirming. Again, it's kind of like what we did with the cricket crowd. Let's hear from the rest of the group on this, especially when there's challenges. I think people want to make sure that they know the challenge is heard, right? Especially by leaders. Not that we can always fix it or do something, but just to validate in this moment, this has been a very challenging topic, or this discussion today really has been overwhelming and we might not solve it today. I want to ensure others also have an opportunity to share what they're thinking. So I see ourselves as space creators, and I've said this before, but I want to try to create the space for discussion and dialogue in the best way that we can. So good thoughts today, and I appreciate the discussion in the chat. I hope it's helpful for all of you in this Zoom world, that you're learning from each other as well, and sharing some of your ideas. We have another poll opportunity here. Heather, do you want to kick this off for us?
Sure. So as you think about some of the strategies that we've talked about, kind of verbalizing those expectations or sharing your intent into the meeting, try written or verbal approaches. So again, allowing that space where people can like I'm going to send in advance what I'm expecting of you in the meeting, engaging in some of those one-on-one conversations that we've talked about that are so important, and then encouraging those alternative views. So which one of those might feel like a challenge for you to take away from today's webinar and think about applying in very near future conversations with your team?
What I love about this is each situation's unique, right? And some of us have tried some of these already. So you might be trying something again, or trying something new, or just being intentional about something, I think is always a good opportunity for us to take action and just be intentional.
Yeah.
Maybe just a couple more seconds here. Still seeing some coming through. Really great participation today. I'm really impressed with the conversations happening and seeing the comments out here.
Victoria, I see your comment in the chat that one-on-one conversations are a challenge at times, and certainly we hear that a lot, don't we, Brooke, when we coach leaders and consult with leaders, that is a challenge for many reasons. And I would just challenge you, Victoria, and others that are feeling similar to that, is when we don't have the conversation, it sometimes can make it harder down the road. So, we may not have the conversation one-on-one with the Dominator after the first meeting, but when we start to see a pattern very quickly, really just understanding where they're coming from. Again, it's not meant to be ill-intended, but understanding where they're coming from and really having that conversation around maybe setting expectations, going into future meetings can save you time in the long run. So love to see the variety of things. And again, we challenge you to take these as we've talked about them today and implement them right away. It's top of mind for you. And I think Brooke and I are pretty confident that you'll see some different outcomes when you try some of these strategies going forward.
I love that, Heather, because I often think of myself when I'm feeling a little nervous to bring something up. I think about the broader picture of what's at risk if I don't have a conversation about this, or what's at risk for the rest of the team just because it's hard for me. So that gives me some pep, I guess, or some courage once in a while when I think about the broader group or the trickle down effect. So all right, seeing a good variety here. So the verbalizing expectations, trying something written perhaps, it was a little lower down our list. Encourage alternative views. Good, so seeing a real nice split here today. Good that we are personalizing it for all of you. Okay, let's talk about our next area, which is herding cats. Heather, do you want to introduce this one?
I love that expression. And I'm guessing most of you are smiling behind the scenes as we pull up herding cats. So this is that situation where you find yourself in, where maybe you have an agenda or a topic at hand, and it gets a little bit out of control. And what do we do? And I know somebody had a question about that early on, like, how do I rein people in? And again, I think it's a balance, because part of our job as leaders is to create a space for innovation, creativity. We call it collision meetings, where we just come together and people kind of bounce stuff off of each other. And it's amazing what can come as a result of that. But sometimes that can take people off in tangents, and it can be very stressful for us as leaders. So in your chat, tell us kind of, what do you struggle with when it comes to herding cats the most? And Brooke, I'll just ask you, when you've been leading teams or projects and you find this happening, tell me what's going through your mind.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is I waver on, is this good work happening? Or should I be pausing it? Like, this is good inspiration. This is great brainstorming. We're a little off topic of where I started, but could this be good? Because I don't want to shut down potential. And I don't want to jump in too early. So it's, for me, it's about timing and, what's the benefit versus what's the cost. So, and there might not be a black and white answer. We just don't always know.
Yeah, that's really good. sometimes we, again, don't want to interrupt a good conversation. And so we're in our mind, we spend a lot of time trying to weigh the pros and cons of jumping in. We might be thinking, oh my gosh, I have an agenda, more agenda items that I get to. And so it creates a lot of confusion for us, if you will, in our minds of how to handle these types of situations.
Good point.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of managing this herding cats group. Sharing topics in advance, I think, is really important. So if you're that leader that has intentions to get that agenda out, but doesn't get the agenda out, we're all guilty of that at times. How can you share those topics? Or if you're going to have a very thoughtful conversation as a meeting, being able to kind of pose that question out there. If you think about your team, there's lots of different dynamics and lots of different personalities. And those dominators oftentimes don't need time to process. They can kind of jump in and share, but others need time to process in those situations. So being able to be proactive with that is important. Brooke, how do we involve others in that?
Yeah, something I've been trying to do a better job of myself, Heather, is I don't always have to be the one to know and set the exact agenda. I have a few things that I usually have as like a running list of we need to circle back to, or I need to share this, but I will send out a note ahead of time, or at least I try to, and just ask those individuals when I can, what else am I missing? Here's what I think we're going to be speaking on, or what I'd like to save time for. What else haven't I thought of? Because then that's also power sharing, right? We're allowing others to contribute to that agenda. And I might not have them in the right priority. Someone may bring something up that I think, ooh, we really need to talk about this first, and that might trump this on my list. So involving others really helps bring topics to the table and your people to the table. Things that I think about are like validation. You've used that word a couple times here, Heather, but it's that listening and then reflecting. So this sounds really important, that this should come first before this, because it's the biggest concern today, or that it carries the most energy and you seem really excited about this. Yeah. Let's spend our time here. Sometimes we'll use like a code word. So I had another session on this topic with some of our practice operations team members, and we talked about early on in a meeting, even setting that expectation of, I love this, I love our group. It's a tendency that we get off topic. I want to invite you all to use the timeout. It's time to get us back on track. So if you're feeling like we're off track, let's all just do the timeout and use that code word or code statement of, Heather, it's time for us to get back on track. There's no ill intention. It's just simply we've got some other things to cover, and doing so in a respectful tone. So we can invite people to help us do that. I know with other groups, they've done timekeepers, right? We're Heather, you're going to be the timekeeper for this agenda item today. Please interrupt, please interject, please give us a couple minute warning so that we can just kind of stay back on our topic. So just some different mechanisms we could explore and just see what works. Tell us about that skill of empathically redirecting.
Yeah, I saw in some of the chat here that there's some fear in interrupting and how that might be perceived by the group. We talked earlier about, it might cause them to shut down in the future because it might not feel like it's important. But empathically redirecting is a strategy that we use that comes from a place of empathy, right? And so let's say Brooke is going off on a tangent. I might just jump in and say, Brooke, if it's okay with you, can I jump in here? And I would want to validate whatever it is that she's bringing to the table. Or if there's lots of discussion, kind of, the herding cat thing is happening, I would want to jump in and just validate what I'm seeing. And so we're having a lot of really great discussion here in the meeting today. And, I feel like we're making some progress towards X, Y, or Z. I'm wondering, so I want to get elicit from the group. I'm wondering, do we want to continue this conversation? Because it seems productive and we're getting through a lot of things. Or do we want to pause and move forward with the agenda item that we have? So giving the team the autonomy in that moment to make the decision versus us as a leader having to make that decision can be really powerful. but validating that sometimes we might have to redirect. We do need to get to an agenda item. And so I certainly following that same thing. Brooke, if it's okay with you, can I jump in here? You've got some great ideas. And I'm sure if we had more time, there's lots more you could share. Given the time that we have left in the meeting, I'm going to go ahead and redirect us to the next agenda item. But know that this is an important topic and we'll come back to it next week at our team meeting. Or Brooke, you and I can have that conversation at our one-on-one next week. So that's that skill of kind of empathically jumping into the conversation and redirecting it back to what we need to be. And sometimes we can leave it up to the team, and sometimes we have to make that choice as a leader of what to do.
Absolutely. And when we do that, Heather, I think the most important ingredient isn't the hopping in.
Yeah.
It's the validation. That is the most important thing. If we leave that out, we could just call it interrupting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's empathically redirecting. And the intent is, you're sharing back their perception or their experience, and that this is so important, or this has been the biggest challenge, or this really brings the most excitement. And so I think that's really the key, so that it just doesn't absolutely feel like that screeching record of interrupting and moving forward. And there are times where we have to do that, but I think there's a lot of times where we could be doing this as well.
Yeah. And Brooke, I think the validation is what prevents people from shutting down in future sessions, right?
Yeah.
Because they feel heard and understood. They feel valued for the perspective that they're bringing. And so that prevents that fear that we're seeing in the chat function here going forward.
Yeah, good points. All right, good ideas. Well, let us end with our 4 main themes here today that we were going to talk about is around this topic of me versus we. And I think we can all say that we've probably felt this at different times, where maybe I feel like I'm on one page, but Heather and the rest of my team is on another. And it just really feels sidebarred or polarized from one side to the other. Some things that we can do there. This is where I feel like as a leader, all good leaders pause and reflect. It might not be in the meeting. It's too much going on. It might be at the end of our day. It might be at another time. But reflecting and pausing as a leader is a wonderful habit to be in, or even just as a staff member, employee to employee, for us just to pause and step back. And, in some of my coursework, I've read it as seeing things from the balcony, getting off the dance floor and seeing things from the balcony, just to help open up and widen our view. So I might ask myself these questions, and I've done this before, but how am I reacting to the group? A quote that I've borrowed from other work that we've done, Heather, is, how does my participation in this space impact the room? How does my participation in this space impact the room? So that makes me reflect on, what's my reaction? What are my nonverbals saying? Do I look like I'm enjoying this topic or these agenda items? Am I eager to see your participation and what you can contribute? So a good time just to reflect. Sometimes I wonder, in the way that I'm speaking, do my perspectives overshadow the team? Does it shut other people down? Am I asking any open-ended questions to evoke from others? Or is it my delivery of more telling? And so others don't feel like they can contribute. So do my perspectives overshadow the team? Do I understand why my expectations or perceptions are different? Maybe I don't. Maybe I just need to think about that and consider my own preconceived ideas or expectations, that they might be getting in the way. We all have previous experiences. We all have internal biases, some that are known, some that are unknown. So maybe it's a time for me just to sit back and ask myself, why am I responding in this way? Or what might this be? And then the last one there, how have I been as transparent as I possibly could, or even been showing my vulnerability? I think particularly anytime we are in a position of power, meaning we have supervisory roles, people report up to us. I mean, even our language, right? There is an assumed sense of vulnerability that we tend to let go of, I feel like, across our work roles. Do people see the shield, or do they see me as a human being? And that's something I've really been curious about. I want to be able to do both. I want to be able to show that holistic appreciation for the individual, including the task performed, as well as the person they are, as well as being factual and straightforward when needed. So does it give me a chance to kind of self-assess? Am I able to show both of those or communicate both of those in the work that we do? Mm-hmm. What else would you add, Heather? Anything more that you practice?
I think you said it beautifully. And I think it's just important to take that opportunity to think about what am I bringing and how is it impacting the team? It's really easy to put the blame on the other people, right? Well, they just didn't want to contribute. I opened the space and they didn't share. It's really easy for that, but really allowing that space for you to reflect on what you bring to the conversation, I think is so critical.
Absolutely. Well, we're winding down our time here. We do have one more poll for you to engage in. So which strategy might you use? We can go ahead and activate the poll as we describe them. Encourage tabling a topic. So lots of good discussion. Would it be okay if we save this for next week? Empathic redirection. That's that skill Heather showcased for us of sensitively engaging and interrupting and validating. Reflect on my own energy or nonverbals, or reflect on my own vulnerability and transparency, and just kind of doing that quick self-assessment. See what we get here today.
And again, sometimes it's hard to pick one, isn't it, Brooke? That we might have to think about how do we do both, especially in this situation, because it's how do we encourage it from the team perspective, but what's that self-reflection I can do for myself?
Yes.
All right. So again, we challenge you to think about how can you take this and apply it in the next meeting that you have, using some of those examples, verbal examples of communication that you can utilize as strategies in those situations.
Thank you, Heather. All right. Love the engagement today. This has been one of the best seminars, I think, and hearing from others and generating some questions. We have just a little bit left we want to cover with you, and we are seeing some questions in the Q&A. So Heather and I will collect those, and we will send back kind of some email responses. That way the whole group can see them. We'll put them through back to Bridget and the Wellbeing team, and maybe those could get shared along with the links. So we have links for you today, including a quick resource guide, a reference guide, and some additional digital options that you can share with your team. So we'll plan to do that if that's okay with you, Heather. We'll send back by email, then everyone can see them too. So, all right, Heather, tell us a little bit about like communicating during a sense of conflict. Perhaps this is a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, I think it's, again, being transparent about what you're noticing. And instead of coming in and just, asking a question, which is great to elicit their perspective, sometimes it's helpful to be transparent. Again, in the example, I've sensed this to be difficult, and I hope we could discuss in order to come to a resolution. So really, again, what's my intent for having this conversation with you? We use a lot of, or we want to use a lot of partnering language. So many more we's than I's or you's, because it just feels collaborative and it's very partnering in those situations. Again, we've talked a lot about perspective taking. So when we think about eliciting their perspective, allowing that space by asking open questions. So open questions start with what, how, tell me from your perspective, and really validating what it is that they share with us. And try to really affirm at the deeper level, not just reacting to the emotion that they may be bringing, but this is really important to you. You have a lot of passion around this topic, and it's important for you to get good resolution. Asking permission, I think, is another thing. As a leader, we have a lot of expertise that we want to share, but sometimes our staff member isn't in the space to hear that. And so asking permission, Brooke, would it be okay with you if I just shared some thoughts with you today? And then coming back and circling back with curiosity on, given what I've shared, I'm wondering what your reaction is, or what your thoughts are on what I've shared, or even what we can do to come to an agreement, or what you might do from here. It's kind of moving into that problem solving phase, or empowering them to be a part of that situation. So those are some strategies to really think about when communicating during conflict. And I'll just, to kind of wrap this up, I'm not sure you'll ever get to a place where you're going to be comfortable having some of these conversations. There's always some discomfort in this, but hopefully utilizing some of these strategies will increase your confidence in being able to have them, knowing that, right, I'm coming from a good place. I want you to learn and grow. And so your team members, your whoever it is, whether it's direct staff or your project team members or your colleagues, will know that you're coming from a good place. So being authentic throughout that conversation, I think, is really important as well.
Absolutely. And I always feel like, Heather, discomfort, our brain signals that that's bad.
Yes,
but discomfort for me really means it's hard for me because I care.
Yes.
And that's why it's uncomfortable, because I care about you. I care about our team. So we have to question our own thinking and stories that discomfort isn't always bad. It's just coming from a sense of hopefully that positive intent and caring that you have for your teammates and your coworkers. So, well, we want to thank you for being a wonderful group. Should you have additional questions, certainly pop them in the chat, but we'll leave you with just a couple different resources that Bridget will also be sending out. We have an X-Tech consultation. So that is a leadership consultation. So if you're in a leadership role and you're thinking you'd like some additional consult time, perhaps even coaching, certainly you can email us, and we have other wonderful resources on our webpage. And so please take a look at that if we can be of help. And I will turn it back over to Bridget.
Thank you so much, Brooke and Heather, for sharing these excellent strategies to help us through navigating through team dynamics. And yet we know that it can be challenging to navigate through those dynamics. So I was reflecting just on the Mayo Clinic values, such as compassion. And it's just a good reminder to offer ourselves self-compassion, to be kind in ourselves, remind ourselves as leaders that we're doing the best we can today. So may you give yourself that gift of self-compassion today. Thank you so much for attending.